Hi, welcome. This is the reading of Walking a Rainbow, story of when I walked with my son, who was 9 at the time, the Camino de Santiago, and we're up to chapter 17 now. This is a short chapter, but there's a lot in it. Maybe it's a good idea to provide a bit of an introduction to the chapter. It's a chapter which attempts to change your mind. That's quite a difficult thing for anyone to do. And people talk about changing their mind, they mean altering their opinion, but really changing your mind, that's a big deal. The reason for this is that the mind gets into habits of functioning, that particular neural paths, particular neurotransmitters will go along, particular synapses will fire and so on, and this makes a sort of habitual pattern, so that how you experience the world is according to those established lines of activity. To change your mind, you need to get a different way of the brain operating to some extent, and that's not easy to do. And the older you get, the more fixed these material structures of operation become. Now, it's part of, I hope it's obvious by now, if you've been following all these things, that it's part of the function of the Camino to change your mind. You start seeing the world otherwise and experiencing the world differently. Experience is an active skill. It's something we do. We don't just, as it were, raise our eyelids and the world comes in and hits us, and it's not a passive thing, it's an active, creative thing, experiencing the world. And if you simply carry on as you are with your brain in its habitual functioning, you'll see the world fundamentally in the same way. And nothing much is going to happen. There are seekers in this world, not a huge number, it's the minority I think, but they're around, and plenty of people who would like some new spiritual experience. The likelihood of this spontaneously happening with the same unchanged mind is small, although it does happen. With most spiritual paths, you begin by a long period of preparation, of training. The novices work on themselves to become ready for such an experience. That's part of what the Camino does to suitably sensitive people who respond that way. I mean, some people just walk the Camino like a sort of sport or a holiday in it, though even they get modified sometimes, but many of them don't. But if you're open to this sort of thing, the Camino will actually change your brain, the way your brain works, and then there's the opportunity for radically different life-changing experiences. Now, where we left off in chapter 16 was approaching San Juan through this wide path through a forest, and I nearly trod on a viper, just about missed it, which shook me enough to open the capacity to feel, which is a brain activity. I think part of what happened was I was not sustaining the barriers to that, to feeling so strongly after the shock of the viper. And I began to feel what seemed to me to be the creative energy, the growth of the forest itself, and that feeling increased considerably. And at that moment, birds appeared that weren't there prior, swallows I have in my notes, which began to circle immediately above me, hundreds of birds in the end, which was I found an astonishing experience. Birds don't do that well, vultures do in ones and twos, but not swallows. And it's part of the notion that experience is a reciprocal thing, and in certain states of mind that reciprocality seems to operate, that what happens isn't just what mechanically occurs objectively, as it were. There's some sort of liaison between states of mind and events, and that I was very, very surprised by this spiral of birds above me on the way into San Juan, and still in a more open frame of mind, open to feelings and intuitions and the like, with new neural pathways being found in the brain when we approached and reached San Juan. Chapter 17. Living a Myth. San Juan is nothing but an isolated monastery and half a dozen houses. A dirt road stops here, the domestic part of the monastery flanking it like a station, a terminus buffered by its church, a sepulchre for its founder. The path came up by the church's side. It was apparently windowless, the church that is, blind, introspective. The Brazilian woman we had last seen in a thofra sat on a low wall outside, being earnestly engaged in conversation by a well-built but greying man, roughly her age, one hand on her knee, his intent face jutting at her bowed head. He spoke vehemently, the word Cristo, much used, with a squeeze on the knee for emphasis. She wept a little, moved by his faith. Claudio went off to find the priest in charge. Kes and I entered through the garage and wandered round the labyrinthine building, and blundered into a hall, where a large, formally dressed party sat at trestle tables heavily laden with the remains of an elaborate meal, listening to a speech. We stood in the doorway, sweaty, dishevelled and dusty, still burdened with our rucksacks. The man giving the speech faltered as he saw us, and the crowd followed his eyes, and, seeing the diminutive pilgrim, roared in approval and clapped and whistled enthusiastically. We were fated. There was much valiente, and we were led like celebrities to a table where we tucked into the leftovers of cold trout. Claudio returned and said he had found the priest, and as there were no shops or bars here, he would cook us some eggs, if we wished. The light of India was already here, sitting on the floor, one strand of his turban hanging, eating with his fingers. Seated opposite me was the most beautiful, mature Spanish woman. She spoke vivaciously to a man to her right, an elegant woman with silkily black, almost blue hair, tied in a short ponytail with a scarlet scarf. She wore teardrop pearl earrings and a plain black dress. She had classically strong features with thin, arched eyebrows. Her exquisitely courtly fingers gracefully toyed with a single yellow rose. A crowd of children clustered noisily in the doorway. Girls in white lace dresses and boys in cricket pumps and long-legged white shorts, excited both with the occasion and the one of their number elevated to the company of the adults. Kes soon found the attraction of some friends stronger than the attraction of food, and was greeted like a hero as he shyly joined them. I was sitting quietly on the low wall outside by the sandy road when I next saw him about an hour later. He came careering around the side of the building, his boots incongruously huge, pursued by at least 20 kids baying like hounds. He seemed exceptionally red-cheeked, like a Fiesta apple. He slid to a halt by me just long enough to shout with manifest delight, "I'm completely pissed!" before roaring off. In the morning I took a wander around. San Juan has a most distinctive atmosphere of its own. Atmosphere, felt quality, is as hard to describe as a flavour. It was like the touch of bare metal or the taste of ice-cold milk. Here there is something smooth, unalloyed, basic, a simplicity, a purity, an honesty. And all this with a depth and a placidity that is quite exceptional. Everything here expresses a quality of elemental sufficiency, a limpid peace which has thrown off all elaboration as unnecessary distraction. It constantly and calmly whispers what we already know at heart, that we really need but little, and if we had access to our own fecund depths, it would be enough, and more than enough. The place speaks of the death of effort. The monastic rooms are spacious and simple, the church itself elegant and plain. San Juan has his tomb in the crypt, a potent spot. Silent and immaculately simple, yet it reeks with quiet power, like a pregnant pause in a symphony. Upstairs in the main church, it is said that twice a year, at the equinoxes, a single shaft of light pierces the thin alabaster in a slit window above to shine first on the carved form of Gabriel, and thence, as it moves on, to the awaiting womb of Mary nearby. Death below in the crypt, glorious life above, a place of annunciation and joyful birth. The heart of the other buildings is a sort of well, a small dark courtyard with a primitive roseate sandstone balcony, like an elevated cloister running round at first floor level. Completely enclosed, cool and shadowy, secretive and uterine, it has an ancient aura of profundity, as if it were a fragment of a Tibetan monastery transplanted here. Forget the history and the architectural guidebook. San Juan is a mythic place. Not in terms of any particular myth, a specific story, but rather a place where things happen for symbolic reasons. A myth is a story which maps a spiritual process. A hero is someone who lives a myth, someone who leaves their trivial self and takes on an immemorial role. A mythic place is somewhere that is embedded in the mythic consciousness. Someone approaching a mythic place in suitable conditions, driving up in a car for a look would not do, will enter the myth. San Juan is one such place. They are very rare. I will try to explain. But first, forget that myths are stories, fictional. Tolkien was once asked why an intelligent man like himself bothered to write fiction. He replied that he didn't write fiction, he wrote the truth. Next, take on board the idea that there are places which incarnate a myth. Everything about them, their setting, the landscape, plants, buildings, even their names, but above all their atmosphere and the events which accrue from it, are dynamically mythic. Any primed person approaching the place enters the myth. The entire Camino incarnates the grand myth of the questing soul, striving to transcend itself, till it dies with the setting sun and is reborn, transformed. But there are special sites on the way which embody significant episodes or concentrate the whole like a seed. San Juan is one such. I carried binoculars on the walk, just another bird watcher, I had thought, but Claudio had insisted that it must be in my chart somewhere, that it was a significant fact about me. It meant something. My interest in watching birds is in the exhilaration of observing flight. It is an empathic experience. The spirit partakes of what it observes. Be careful what you look at. When I watch a soaring bird, my heart goes with it and shares its motion. I escape my earth-bound self and feel a liberation. The bird watching is not just a twitcher's hobby. It expresses my yearning to be free. This is ancient knowledge. In the iconographies of the world and their mythic developments, birds are associated with release, knowledge, prophecy. They are not bound to the restrictions of the earth and its mundane gravitational limitations. They are up and away. They travel elsewhere and return with secret knowledge of far away and exotic places. So, to use the vocabulary of the past, birds depict the soul which flies free of the entrapping and limiting body when that body expires. And their transitional function between life and death gives them access to another knowledge, a knowledge of the future, from which prophecies may be extracted by the intuitively gifted and trained. This is why angels, beings of a greater freedom of another dimension of being, are winged. Winged beings, birds, angels, Hermes, Eros, link heaven and earth. Shamans of all kinds wear feathers. Irish bards too, they say. Inspired poetry is the language of the birds. How do I know this? A little bird told me. Individual types of bird have more specific meanings. I was in the land of the Rio Oca, or Oca, the land of the goose. We had crossed that river, walked on and climbed the Montes de Oca, the mountains of the goose, and entered its forests of oak and pine and fir. These particular forests have long been regarded as a dangerous place where the pilgrim may easily come to harm and may wander lost and imperilled. In medieval times and long after, this was notoriously the territory of bandits and wolves. a Dantean and Conradian dark wood, which contained the threatening powers of nature and its ruthless values. Here I had encountered a dangerous snake, and felt that confusing power, while swallows, markers of summer's strength, had congregated around me above. In a clearing in the forest was San Juan, where I found a celebration in progress, was feted, presented with a fish, and encountered an elemental peace. Believe me, San Juan is a very special place, but it must be apprehended through a training which consists of the entire walk up to that point to reach it, of the feelings to produce an active symbolic awareness. The goose is the paradigmatic bird of pilgrimage. It is migratory and succumbs to some deep instinct to travel and be gone, as does the pilgrim. It is traditionally regarded as following the sun, as does the traveller to Santiago, each day tracing the motion of the sun westwards to the horizon. To see a skein of geese is to witness an omen of good tidings, for they gain some strange secretive knowledge in the land of the setting sun, the place of death. The goose is the original Christmas bird, preceding chickens and turkeys. It is the bird of celebration, of feasting. Furthermore, it is eaten at the year's deep midnight, the critical time of the death of the year, when at the lowest ebb of its power it renews itself and embarks on the regeneration which will bring the summer and its swallows. The man, San Juan, after whom the place is named, was a devotee of Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas is Saint Claus, is Santa Claus, is Father Christmas. Events were bundling up and making sense, a fool's sense. For hadn't a child mistaken me for Father Christmas in Biana? Father Christmas is a popular embodiment of the bounty of natural love, of boundless giving at a time of paucity, a figure whose only role is to give, and that in abundance. And to cap it all, here we were offered the eggs of rebirth and given fish, Christ's symbol. Why, even his name, Cristo, was the first thing I heard at the door. So San Juan is a haven of ancient peace, an oasis of primeval tranquility, reached through a risky encounter with nature's potency. I had almost forgotten Margarita and her instruction that I should try to find the 5 special places on the way, using only feelings and intuition. Now the memory came flooding back. I had found the second special place. After San Juan, I knew what I was here for and what I was seeking.